And he's joining the dark side and checking out some Star Wars Legion.
Welcome to Trident Wargaming, a podcast dedicated to all aspects of tabletop wargaming. Your hosts are Bill and Andy.
Welcome to episode number 6 of Trident Wargaming. I'm your host, Andy, and today we'll be talking about some Star Wars Legion. With me is a good friend of mine, a simple man trying to make his way in the universe, Mr. Hal Martin. How's it going, Hal?
Good, buddy. How are you?
Oh, I'm pretty good, pretty good.
Simple man, eh? Wouldn't be the first time I heard that.
Yeah. I'd figure I'd throw that one in there, have some fun with it.
For sure.
So, thanks for being on the show.
Thanks for having me.
You betcha, anytime. So, I know you've been in the gaming, I shouldn't say industry, but the gaming scene for a while. Hmm? Why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and your gaming history?
Well, I'm an old guy. My gaming started way back in 80s, early 80s with D&D. Went through all the classic board game kids stuff. Played D&D up until recently too. Got into miniature wargaming 40K in my 20s, along with every TCG out there. And that's where I knew you. We used to play 40K.
Yep.
And that just kind of morphed into everything else that's out there. So I've tried so many different systems, and there's still more I want to go with. So yeah, I've continued gaming for the better of 25, 30 years now. So from board to video to miniature and card and dice, yeah.
Yeah, there's been a lot on the go for sure. I know myself. I know myself. It's been a long time too, mainly in miniature gaming, but as you know.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But yeah, we just kind of reconnected in the last little bit.
That's right. Ran into you at one of the stores.
Yeah.
And just saw you from it was pretty funny seeing you from across the room. And I was like, I know that dude. It's been 10 years. So yeah, man, that's good. I'm happy. I'm glad we reconnected.
Oh, for sure. I'm very happy about that. And the best thing too about it, of course, it's over a miniature game.
Yep.
And that miniature game that we're going to be talking about, Star Wars Legion, like
favorite.
Exactly. It's awesome. I love it. Of course, I went a little berserk on it with the models, but I just love it.
Yeah.
So yeah, I'd like jumping in the light speed here. I guess we'll start talking about it. And I got a couple questions because I know you're quite involved with the game and with the local community here in Edmonton, the Edmonton Star Wars Legion game, the Facebook group. So if you guys are in the area, check it out. Try to join it. If you're all about Legion, it's a place to be. It's very active. So I'm just jumping into wargaming. I come across Star Wars Legion. What's the game about?
Essentially, it's a miniature war game where 2 players, or more if you do teams or all out, face off against each other on a table, be it a 3x3, a 3x6 table. You each bring your armies that are in the Star Wars theme, use miniatures, unit cards with points, and dice to attack and take out your enemy, complete the objectives, but essentially in the same vein as 40K and most other miniature war games.
Yeah, there's a lot of different aspects to the game.
Right?
Oh, yeah. But it seems like, a lot of people our age, younger, they can jump right into it and play it. And I've been finding that, like, you'll notice a lot of, especially right now, it's a lot of parent and child are playing it as well.
Yep, there's 2 generations that are coming into it, I found. Those that watched, that were the original trilogy, such as myself and yourself, that grew up loving that, and then were somewhat indifferent on the prequels when they came out, or whatever. But the Clone Wars TV show, brought another generation into the game that I didn't see until they released the new sets, which may be jumping ahead a bit, but they released some from that era. And it had a complete new resurgence in the game. So when you get a lot of parents playing with their kids, that's where it is.
Yeah, and that's an awesome thing to see.
Mm-hmm.
So some of the other games aren't quite like that.
Nope.
But yeah, no, Star Wars, it's right up that alley, right?
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, so like there's a lot of like you said, 2 box sets, and there's 4 factions right now.
4 factions. They have 2 core sets out there. Core sets are 2-player starter sets with 2 factions in each for you and a friend to start with, or to split, as you will. 4 factions. The first core set that was released 3 years ago is the Rebels versus the Empire, traditional. And then just a little over a year ago, they released the Clones versus the Droids, essentially, in a starter set. So those are your 4 factions they currently have.
And they're pretty good little box sets for what you get in them. So if you're just starting in, that's pretty good way to go. And then after that, like there's so many different other expansions that come into the game.
Oh yeah.
And some of the differences of the game compared to other gaming systems out there, and I've noticed this is a big one. There is no specific army book.
No.
For each faction, right?
Nope.
Which is, it's pretty like I find that's a pretty cool approach, right? So if you want, like, when you go and buy a new box set, so for example, I guess some clone troopers from the main box set, they have their own cards, right? And they have their own little keywords and whatnot, and we'll go into that a little later. But when you go buy an expansion, they actually have their own rules with that expansion box set.
Yeah. So essentially, when you're building an army, they do have a breakdown. I won't get too deep into it. They have a breakdown of so many leaders, so many core units, heavy weapon units, big vehicles, those type of things. So these expansions fill those gaps. When you get a core set, you get your base stuff. You get like a leader and a couple cores and a little support unit. When you buy expansions into them, they each come with all their information. Sometimes they have new keywords that come out in those, and those would be included in there's like a little rules leaflet, if you will, and it shows you how to build the models as well, because it is a sprue cut and build type game. But you get the cards for them and some upgrade cards for them. So pretty much when you buy a unit, you have everything in there you need to go with that unit. There's no source books or anything for any factions or anything like that. Not yet. There hasn't been for 3 years now, but 3.5 years, but we'll see. So yeah, that's how you basically build them, right? And you don't need to get anything other than when you're buying the box. It all comes in there.
Yeah, that's pretty awesome.
Yeah.
They did well with that, that's for sure. I know a couple guys have bought in like a couple of core sets just to fill out their army and whatnot.
Mm-hmm. Well, in a core set, I mean, the starter pack core set, the game does have proprietary dice and movement rulers and range rulers. There's no tape measures used. So those all come in the core set. You can buy those separate blister packed as well. So if you choose not to go that route and you don't want to start with the commander that comes in the core set, and like Obi-Wan comes for the clones with a couple phase 1 clone units and then a bark speeder. So if you don't want to go that route, you can buy most of those in singles. The only way to get the commanders that are in the core sets are the core sets. That's where they lock you in with that one. But if you choose not to, you could buy singles of everything you need. You could buy a commander that comes in a separate blister pack with all his cards that are needed and such. But essentially from there, you're pretty free to go that route if you need. A little more expensive, of course, because they give you a nice tidy price when you buy a core set. So
that they do. So now that we got like a little bit of initial insight and info in the game, so kind of want to talk about the armies a bit and just kind of an overall what the factions are and what the factions are like. Like you've already mentioned pretty much the factions, but just kind of their style. What makes them different?
Yeah, well, like in every game, and even if you do any of the canon and the lore in the movies and that, not all factions, not all sides are created equal. They're done a little differently, so you have to play them a little different. So for 4 factions, we can start with droids.
Roger.
Yeah, Roger. Essentially, all your robots, but it's also that faction. So you have Dooku in there. You get Cad Bane, so it's not just droids, but that's your main bulk of the army. They're cheap, so you get tons of them, and they are what you consider a swarm army, where you get lots of them on the table because they're inexpensive. Now they die quickly and they don't hit everything, but their tactic is based off of percentages of numbers. If you roll 50 dice, chances are you're going to get a bunch of hits, even with those dice that aren't that bad, so to speak. So they're a swarm type army. You move to their counterparts, the clones.
Mm-hmm.
The clones are heavily armored, heavily gunned, very strong faction. However, they're very expensive. So they're the opposite end of the scale, where you don't get a whole lot on the board. What you put out there is very good. They're hard to drop, and they take down a lot of units. However, you don't get a lot of them, and when you lose them, it hurts because it's gaps in your army that fall. So again, back to droids, you lose a few droids, there's just so many of them that, it doesn't affect that way. So, good.
Just recently, like I've actually never played against them, and on the TTS, the Tabletop Simulator, I've actually had a chance to play against both the droids and the clones, and clones are a tough army to go against. A lot of shots.
So many of them.
And then they have that token sharing,
command sharing. Yeah.
Yeah, it's crazy. Like, and the droids, when I seen them on the board, it's like, wow, that's a lot of them.
And they cover everywhere. There's no holes. Like, so if you look across the table at your opponent, I mean, it's generally played. A full army is an 800 point army, and it's a 3x6 table, 6 being the wide edge that you're on. And looking across, when you generally face armies, you can see holes, areas that aren't as full of units or models. Whereas when you face the clones, that's what you get. You have holes all over because there's not many on the board, but there's nowhere to get around with droids. They just flood the tables. So it's a pretty cool faction to do. Yeah. But moving on, so with the Imperials are like what they were in the movies. They're well armored, well gunned, plentiful, and very resourceful. So I like to call them a jack of all trades. They have good units in every aspect. They have good commanders, good core units, good vehicles. The ATST's in there, and everybody loved the ATST, the Chicken Walker.
Yeah.
So really good units all around. So they can fill any type of army you're hoping to make. They can put a bunch of cheaper ones out if you want. Not as cheap as the droids, but they can put out blasts of cheap stormtroopers that work well. So they're a very powerful army because of that, because of their ability. On the other end of the spectrum, you get the rebels. The rebels are decently priced. They're not overly expensive. Their attacks are pretty good, but their defense isn't the best, right? They're organized okay, but not as well organized as the Imperials, for example. Pure military force. So you have to be a little tricksy. Quite often the rebels are looked at as the tricksy faction, if you will, to play. You can't just, and we have friends that have tried, you can't just run up with a gun line and try to go toe-to-toe with people. It doesn't work that way because of their weaker defense. So they have to be smart with their flanking, smart with their moves and that. So very cool faction to play, but they do play different than others because of that. They can't afford to just stand out there and go toe-to-toe with clones or.
Yeah, they seem almost kind of like glass cannon. Where
yeah, a little bit. They aren't that powerful in offense. Now, jumping a little bit, One thing that the game has is a rules reference guide. It's a live rule book, a living rule book that constantly can change, and it's online and you can download it whenever you need. They make announcements probably twice a year. Units in the game have points costs to them, like most games do. And you play, you pick what you need for your minimum and then you fill the rest. So one thing that they do is rather than changing the unit cards themselves and going, let's give them another attack dice, for example. What they do is they change the points up and down to reflect the strength of the unit to keep balance in the game. So, with Rebels, they were having a lot of trouble. So they kind of dropped their points down a little bit on a lot of key units to promote more units being on the board, or people finally saying, I'm going to give that unit a shot. They were pretty expensive before for what they had. So again, that's one way of changing up something like the Rebels, right?
No, definitely. And it's nice with each faction, like there's so many different units per selection, like your command and your operatives and your core and your support units, and it's like any other game. It has almost a force organization chart, but you get to, you get to build it and tinker with it. And
yeah, it's quite minimal to start with the force organization chart. Like you only need a commander and a couple what they call core units, which are basic troopers, not really named or specific types. So, like stormtroopers would be a core trooper, right? So B-1 battle droids, Roger, that would be a core unit where you just see swaths of them on the field. Right. But the options that you have out there, like what you mentioned, operatives, what's really cool, operatives are what would be your solos. Those would be your named characters that aren't commanders that you know in the game, like Chewbacca, like Darth Maul, and such, so your special individual units that can do things, but they're not necessarily generals or lead anything. So, yeah, many different options of forces out there to build your army with.
Exactly. And so playing the game, a little bit just in the last little while, noticing the differences with the games compared to other games, like I mentioned before with the army book. Obviously, there's none of that, but I've noticed with the game, like a lot of it is based off of like unit leaders. Which is quite a different take compared to like you move your whole unit and you're measuring from each individual miniature and whatnot.
That's right, and it's a big thing that separates it from other games that I find. So let's take a core unit for example, as we were saying, of stormtroopers. In that unit, you will always have a leader plus additional models that are just basic stormtroopers. When you move a unit, use a proprietary ruler that they have. It's a little bendable range ruler. Everything is taken from the leader. It doesn't matter where the other guys are in that unit. Those other models in that unit do have to be, in cohesion with your leader, and that's just an area around him of a specific distance that they have to be in. But everything's done from him. So if you move, you measure from that leader, and then the rest of the troops all follow. You don't have to take a tape measure, measure each individual model. All you do, it's just from your leader, and then he has that cohesion bubble, if you will, around him that the rest all form into. In addition to that, in attacks, the attacks come from the leader to an opposing unit that they attack. The only time a non-leader model in a unit really comes into play is whether they can be seen or whether they can see if they're the attackers as well. So if your unit has some of your models and troops hidden around a building, well, they can't see what the leader's shooting at. They can't participate. But if everybody can see, they can shoot as well. And when you're aiming from that leader, no matter where the rest of your models are, even if they're in front of the leader, it's always from that leader. So it makes attacks and movements so quick, right? It doesn't matter where the rest are when you're moving or where they are where they're shooting. In general, you're not measuring from everybody. So those really separate it from other games I found, and that's a big difference. It's something I really liked, you know.
Yeah, myself as well. It's definitely different. Don't have to lug that tape measure anymore either. But
But now you have, you know, the proprietary rulers as well, right?
exactly.
But it seems to work okay. You know, don't hear any complaints about it. I hear nothing but positivity from new people to the group, how they love that aspect of it, right? And I mean, just a side note, when we're saying that the leader is everything for a unit, they've adopted a rule that as you're being shot, as your unit's being shot, your leader is always the last one you take off the board. So you're not taking specific units from your enemy. You would take 3 hits into them, and the person, you know, the player whose unit that is would remove them. The rule they adopted is you always take your leader last. And if for some reason your leader gets picked off, there are some specific unit moving or removing mechanics in the game. They're very rare and very hard, such as a force choke from Palpatine, Dooku, or Vader, of course. They can target a specific and remove it. So where the saving for that is that your unit leader, if they get removed for some reason, you always replace another available unit or model with him. So you'll always have your leader on the board to the very end, because you still need to move and shoot with that unit. So it eliminates that, you know, that sniping type aspect of your leaders so that you can't do anything. I mean, it eliminates that. So it's a really good mechanic there.
So speaking of like the mechanics of the game as well, the start of the game, and like as you're building your army, you have a set of your command cards, right? Which is, it's an interesting way of doing it. Like when you build your army, you have to select missions, and you build a battle deck, and like you have your command cards, and you can pick them from generic cards plus whatever your characters that you take, your command and your operatives will get you these specific cards. But there's a whole tactic to the game for when you're bidding to see who's going to activate first, right?
So during each round, at the start of the round, you're going to have a handful of cards that are hidden from your enemy. And these cards there's 7 of them. Each of these cards will have a pip number on them from 1 to 3. There's actually a 4 pip, and that's a generic one that has to go in every deck. And it's just organize one, or, you know, activate 1 unit. It's a very basic thing, so you can always play. So as you said, there's some generic ones that allow you to activate units at different pip levels. And then there's ones that come, so each of your operatives will come with a specific set of 3, and each of your commanders will have a specific set of 3 as well. So when you're building your army, there's some rules behind making this command deck of 7 cards. Remember, 1 is always that number 4 pip, but you can only add ones that are generic or of the operatives or commanders that you have. So 1 pips, it's basically done in a speed. So at the start of your, let me back up a sec. When you're starting your, when you're starting your activation, you bid your cards. You have 1 card each out of your hand. You hold face down.
Yeah.
You turn them over. They have pip values on them, which is the key thing behind them. The pip values are, again, 1, 2, and 3. The lower the number, faster it is. So if we flipped cards and you had a 3 pip and I had a 2 pip, I will be activating first. I won initiative. Additionally, on those cards is information on what can be activated from them. Because someone's like Luke Skywalker, who comes with his, he's only allowed to activate himself, for example. Whereas someone like Princess Leia, her cards help activate other units as well. So she tells you specific types can go. And the main thing is the pips to see who's getting the initiative, right? And if you tie, you do a roll-off. Basically, winner of the roll-off gets initiative. So they can be really key strategically if you need to go first with that unit because he's going to die or he needs to take someone else out before they attack. You know, it happens quite often when it's big named units versus big named units and they've been beating the hell out of each other, and this is the last go, and I need to take that unit out or that named character out before they can get their big attacks. Because of course, the bigger the names, usually the bigger the fun they are, but more expensive type units, right? So the command cards are very strategic, and you can't just have everything that's a number one. They limit it to 2 of each. So 2 number 1s, 2 number 2s, 2 number 3s, and of course that number 4 generic. So it's strategic. It's a game in a game of building your deck, knowing with what you're coming with, and it's not hard to do. It's not very, very hard to do. So it's not that intimidating, because you won't have a ton of cards, because you won't have a ton of named characters, right? Usually 1 or 2 commanders, 1 or 2 operatives. So, and you can pick a couple of each if you want. You don't have to take all of Luke's 3, for example. You can take one specific one.
And with those cards, like, as you're going to the initiative and you're deciding what cards you're using, once that card is used, it's now gone, right?
Gone from the game, except for that 4 pip always comes back to your hand. So yeah, they're one and done cards. So it's very important that if you use something, you take advantage of any. I mean, because in addition to on the cards to who gets to go with activations, and we can get into that next, but they give bonuses sometimes. So characters that are named on that card may get bonus tokens to allow them to hit better or defend better or something. So, if you've got one that allows you to hit better, you better hope your character is going to take advantage of that turn, or else it's a wasted card, right?
Yeah, definitely. And there's like sequencing too, like certain circumstances, like even with when I play my Empire with my speeder bikes and, General Veers, I use this one card to use it on the support units, I believe.
Make speeder bikes better.
Yeah, they end up getting a dodge, right? So that tactic, using it at the right time, can really save them, right? Because they are fragile at times, if you have them in the wrong spot. So it's definitely a good way of, you look at the cards and check them out, read them out, and see how they play in game. I know I've been trying a few different ones, especially with that operative Darth Vader. That's an interesting unit to use.
And and that's an aspect to the game, is because the canon is, and the IP is so well known. But look at the Skywalker saga movies. It's 9 movies long. That starts as Darth Vader essentially starts as a child, then has him as the evil bad guy in the middle, and then as he's gone, we see the continuation of the story. So what you have along there is that you have the possibility of having the same character in multiple roles. Like, take Luke Skywalker, for example. When we first meet him in episode 4, he's just a farm boy. He can't whip around a lightsaber like he was able to in Return of the Jedi. So what they can do is they can bring out multiple iterations of those characters, and they do with Darth Vader and Luke specifically. So you have Farm Boy Luke and you have Jedi Luke. And Farm Boy Luke, he's not as impressive. He's good. He's very good. All the named guys are usually pretty good in their own way. But that point system, he's a little less expensive than Jedi Luke. And Jedi Luke is just a beast out there. He can do a bunch of different abilities. His attack dice are better, and his movement's even better. So, but you pay more for him. So they're both part of the Rebel faction. They can't be fielded at once because there can be only one Luke. In that same line, you can play against the same faction across the table. So Rebels can take on Rebels, and they can have a Luke. You can have a Luke. That your building restrictions are only inside, your army with what you do. So those aren't as fun, of course, mirror faction matches, but needs to be said. But the different iterations on what you could play are really cool, and that's something needs to be known too. Like, you want to take, badass Vader, you can. He's very expensive, but he's a murder machine for sure. But yeah, so it's cool with the command cards how they change too, right? Certain support characters like General Veers with your speeder bikes, where he has stuff that supports vehicles, because we know Veers from episode 5, Empire Strikes Back. So he makes vehicles in his area better with his command cards, for example.
Yeah, and he's very cost efficient too. Like he's pretty
Mhm.
pretty low on points. He's a good support commander.
But in turn, his personal attack and defense aren't the best.
No.
So that's why he's a cheap option opposed to going with like Operative Vader. He's very expensive. So you want him out on the front lines. You want him getting in there and wreaking havoc and causing devastation. Whereas, Veers with his little sidearm pistol isn't going to do a lot. And once a character's off the board, even if it's your commander, they're gone. So, and again, those named cards that they bring to your hand, those command cards, if your character's not on the board, those command cards can't be played because those are actually being called out by that character, if you could imagine that, right? So envision that.
Yeah, and it's a good mechanic that they have in place for that.
Yeah, it's pretty cool.
Yeah,
pretty cool.
A lot of tinkering you can do, especially with all the characters for each faction, and they just keep on coming out with more, which is awesome. Like they just, I think they have Lando and Callus coming out soon here, right? So those will be interesting.
And what's pretty cool is that the Imperial got Iden Versio from Battlefront 2. So they made Iden Versio with Del Mico and Gideon Hask. So they have Infernal Squad in the game. So they've taken it not just from movies or books in the comics. They've taken it from, TV shows as well with Callus, and some of the ones from the Rebels TV show. They've started making spatterings like Sabine Wren is out there.
Yep. Yep.
And of course, video games as well. So the canon's huge. And it just since the mouse got a hold of them, Disney, they've just been snowballing and just expanding out further and further. So I assume pretty quick we're going to have the Mandalorian type cast.
Oh, I think so. I think so.
Right. So there's no end to it in that sense currently, as long as the franchise keeps expanding somehow. There's always, and they do add stuff that we've never heard of as well, which is fine to fill little roles and whatnot. Right. So.
Yeah, there's so much that they can do, which it's just awesome being big Star Wars fans. And
essentially, if you're a Star Wars fan, this is a very good game to play if you like miniature wargaming, right? Because you're going to see all those names, all those type of characters that even the generic ones. And it's limited on vehicles, but they have them. They have them in there. They have tanks, the AAT droid tank, that cool looking kind of spherical half sphere thing. They've got that. That is, so they've got the ones that that you've seen.
Yeah, definitely. They, I think probably in the future we'll probably see some other factions. Not 100% sure, but just a hunch, kind of a feeling.
Yeah, it's hard to tell. It's kind of the elephant in the room is FFG, who was running the game, had the game. It was their game. Asmodee bought them years ago. Asmodee's huge board game company bought them up and had a couple other ones. Atomic Mass Game is one that falls under their banner. Well, they've recently given the Star Wars miniatures, not just Legion, miniature games like X-Wing and Armada, and Legion 2 Atomic Mass games. So they're, because FFG's been a board game company originally, and then they wanted to kind of step into that miniature games world. They started with X-Wing, and we won't get too deep in this, but started with X-Wing, and it was a huge success. Like everybody loved it. Yeah, it was crazy.
Massive.
Yeah. So they started going, let's do Armada, which is, big fleets in space, and then Legion had come along, which is the ground fight, if you will.
Yep.
So it's never been their forte. So when Asmodee was doing a restructuring, I guess, if you will, they took those games away and gave them to Atomic Mass Games, who only have one game under their belt, but Marvel Crisis Protocol, which is a fantastic game in itself. But this is made up of industry heads that have been in the miniature gaming community, if you will, for a long time. Like a lot of War Machine guys had come over that are helping run that now. So the reason why I bring that up is it's hard to say what their vision's going to be because it's so new, the transition.
Yeah.
So we're in a little bit of limbo on that, but you never know if they want to bring out a scum and villainy type thing where you have Jabba the Hutt running troops or whatever, like that's possible. There's, and then even the newer First Order, they can be a faction, for example. So
I think we'll see them.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh yeah. That's the way I think they're going to go. If they do another double faction, it'll be the movies from 7, 8, 9 with the Resistance and the First World and the First Order.
First Order, yeah, the different eras, yeah, pretty
Yeah.
much. Which is, I think that's how they kind of gone with a lot of things for Star Wars. They do that, but again, with all this new stuff that they're coming out with too, their options are endless, right?
TV shows, movies, like
Yeah,
what's going to come out from the Obi-Wan TV show, right? When that comes, because that's around the corner, right? So
yeah, for sure. It's great. I can't get enough of it myself. So,
like I said, if you're a Star Wars fan, right?
right. But yeah, going back to what you were saying there about with like the miniatures, there was a little difference there too with the miniatures. The initial games, the initial core set, I should say, that came out, the miniatures are very solid and very not a lot of multi parts to them. And then when the Clone Wars set came out, I've noticed that the sets came out. There were a lot of the miniatures are more on sprue, so there's a lot of multi parts. You know, I've assembled a few of the droids, and they're a little finicky, but they're pretty well built. Like there's little notches that things fit in that Kate, that's how it fits in, and it's going to sit there like that, right?
Yeah. When they first came out, the game was first released up into including actually the clones were done this way as well from the starting factions.
Mm-hmm.
The droids were the first ones on sprues. The clones weren't. They would come, each individual unit would come in a little baggie. And it would have, the torso, the legs, the head, the arms, for example. Everything was almost push fit, if you will. They have little notches, like little L-shaped pins in the arms that would go in the sockets in the torso. So it was cool. You could get them in, you could fit them, and then you'd glue them. They weren't just strictly a push fit. You would glue them. But posability was purely from you. Like if you had an arm bent at a 90 degree, you couldn't angle it up or down. It was where it was locked, right? So that's up to you to, cut and mod and start doing that stuff. And it was a bit of a softer plastic as well. And with that, you get a little bit less detail in that as well. The guns were good, but they could be more. The clothing was good, but they could be more, like utility belts or something. Let's get a little more detail on them. When they came out with the Clone Wars, they started with the essentially the Clone Wars faction or box set. They started with the droids, and then that carried on into the Empire and Rebels expansions from then on. And of course, every other expansion, including the clones, all came out on sprues with a much, industry standard hard plastic that you cut and build. And while those still can be notched to be put away, they're much easier to mod. And the detail on them is considerably better. They were very good before, but they're excellent now. I think models have all hit that kind of point right now. I mean, of course, for another discussion, but it's at that industry standard of high standard of very good models now. So, and you can do lots with them. A lot of kit bashing. They give you extra arms for different poses. So instead of, one unit trooper just holding onto a rifle, maybe the rifle is at his side and he's got a comm link in his hand, or it's across his back and he's, those type of things. Lots of different options for making now different heads, different helmets, rather than just a generic, one guy. And so it's pretty cool what they're starting to do with those options now. It makes it a lot of fun.
And there's also, that's another difference with the game is you don't technically have to have your modeled, like your miniature modeled with exactly what they have, right? Like what you see is what you get.
WYSIWYG,
yeah. Yeah, right?
Yeah. That's not a hard rule, but generally, so when you have, again, let's go back to a core unit. They have their leader and some troopers. You have options to add heavy weapons to them or additional personnel, for example. So to be able to play those additionals, you have to have there's a separate card. They have cards for all their upgrade things is what they do, by the way. So rather than having the books, as we were saying, the army books for each faction, You have specific upgrades that come in the form of cards. So your personal collection will have a stack of these cards. So if you want to add a heavy gunner, you would take that card out and you would add that model to it. So it's easy to distinguish, when we're talking WYSIWYG, it kind of is and isn't. It's not a hard, fast rule, but it's not, you don't have options of changing that much without having the models. So generally when you buy, taking a step back, when you buy a box set, you'll get your, let's say, stormtroopers, you'll get a leader and some guys, and you'll get a couple extra heavies in there with 2 different weapons on each. So they come with the model and the cards for that. Now you can only have one. The unit card tells you can only have one of them. So depending on the situation, you add which type of heavy you want and that model with it. So you can't generally just say this trooper X here is carrying that heavy weapon. You need to have the card. You need to have the figure for it, right? So,
yeah.
So what I mean is that basically a card is a card. They don't generally have. Well, you can equip your leader with a big flame gun, right? A torch. You can't do that. That's not in the game. You would add a flame torch model to that unit, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, it's pretty straightforward.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah.
Yeah. I do know a lot of guys will like 3D print, different heads or make their troopers look slightly different.
Models altogether even are out there, right?
So, and there's tons of files for that stuff.
And that all depends on your community. If your community's acceptance of that, that's fine. You still need the cards, right? You have to have the card down for the unit. But if you want a different looking Rebel Trooper unit and there's file to down, go for it. You're just using different models. And most communities would be okay with that. They certainly would be okay with that in casual play. As far as tournaments go, and we get back to those, just like any game, you'd always want to check with the TO, the organizer, and find out what's acceptable. But
exactly,
that's 3D printing, right? That changed the whole rules for wargaming, right? Like from terrain to models, it's insane.
It did. I know I've looked into it too, but yeah, it's just mind blowing.
Mm-hmm.
But actually, going on to what you just mentioned, terrain. Now, and of course 3D printing is involved with this a lot. The terrain in Legion, like being a new player into it, what are some ways of going about getting your hands on terrain? Or I think a lot of people just homebrew custom terrain, and like the rules for terrain seem pretty straightforward. Mm-hmm. They're not over complicated.
Nope.
So
for terrain, when you buy a core set or a box set, it doesn't really come with any terrain. It's got some small barricades that they call them in there. That's pretty much it that you get. You don't get any buildings or anything like that, or satellite towers or anything. However, they have released some sets. So they've released 3 sets of terrain so far, which is the downed ATST. So it's a model of an actual ATST crashed and broken up from getting shot from an airspeeder or whatever, right? So they have that out. They also have an Imperial bunker. So if you go back to episode 6, Return of the Jedi, on Endor, they had the bunker they went in. So they have an actual bunker that you can buy, build, paint up, and have that as well. And the last one that they have is the crashed escape pod. So if you go to episode 4, when R2 and C-3PO, jettisoned from the Corvette when it's captured at the start, it crashed on Tatooine. That's kind of where the whole series and movie starts. That's a piece. That piece actually comes with R2 and C-3PO. As a side note, that's the only way to get them. So you get these 3 terrain pieces that you can buy off them. They're fairly expensive. But a cool thing that does come with them is that they do have scenarios based around those pieces that come specifically with them. Those scenarios are like narrative story missions, so you don't run them when you're doing a general fun game or a league game or whatever, unless it's agreed upon by both sides. And they have specific objectives preset for both sides. One would be a defender, one would be an attacker, for example. But yeah, so they have those available, and that's kind of cool that they have those those objectives and that put in for there. But everything else is pretty much kit bashed. Get your trees if you're going to do a forest thing, and if you're doing a sand thing, get your dunes made up and a couple of sand type buildings, if you will. Whatever your terrain might be, your Hoth terrain, right? I mean, there you go. But that's where 3D printing comes in. Kit bashing, home brewing stuff comes in, and yeah, I mean, it's like every other game. I mean, outside of, I mean, you look at some of the GW stuff, they have a lot of terrain available that they make, and I'm hoping maybe with this change, with FFG now abandoning it and AMG, Atomic Mass, picking it up, because Atomic Mass, for their Marvel game, does have a lot of sets of terrain that you can buy. So here's hoping there's more official stuff coming out, but kit bash away, they're everywhere out there. Files available to buy, free files from Thingiverse and whatnot. And
yeah, and then when it comes to in-game, you literally just go over the rules with your opponent, right? So
yeah, you basically go over. And terrain can be described in a couple ways in the game. There's heavy and light terrain. So those are considered simply for blocking shots, giving you cover. Heavy and light cover in the game. That's an aspect during combat where some of the attack dice that hit go away based off your cover level. So it's very simple because there's only 2 cover levels, and it's pretty straightforward whether a unit would be getting cover or not. There's a basic equation in there. How many can you see are in cover? How many are not in cover? If the majority is in cover, the whole unit gains that cover. Because rather than just static models sitting on the board, the idea is that they're moving around. They're hiding behind that cover. They're getting out in the open or whatever. So it's a very simple equation for figuring it out, and excellent. It's excellent too. So
now overall, I mean, the game is great. There's a lot of very good rules and armies and just everything else. Even the rule book itself, like you said, it's really well done. The community, like, just kind of jumping in with the community here in Edmonton, everybody's been super great, very, very positive. I'm sure it's like that in a lot of places, just because everybody's having fun with Star Wars. And
the online community is massive, right?
It's crazy.
There's a lot of content creators. One thing that I've always noted, like we talked about my past and how many games I've played, all these different systems I've tried, and not a slander on any of the others, but one thing I've noticed out of the different types of games I've played, from the Star Wars LCG to Star Wars Destiny, Star Wars, all these games, is that Star Wars communities are generally non-toxic. They're very good. They can be very competitive, but the fun factor is also there too. The competitiveness just comes from gaming. Everybody likes to win and not lose. So, but that just comes from gaming in general, but it's very non-toxic, I found, and that carried over, and from what I see online, and simple things from a new player asking a question. When you see that question that was asked yesterday and the day before, we've seen that in all our systems. Instead of people attacking them, people will just answer it, which shows your different levels of toxicity amongst groups, right? Because you can see in some other game systems, people attack them, call them stupid or whatever. You don't get that. You get a very open, friendly community with Star Wars. I'm not sure why, but I've noticed it, generally across the board in all their games. So,
no, that's awesome. That's where you want to be, right? It's pretty good. I've noticed it, especially with the community here in Edmonton. Everybody's super excited. Everybody's pretty grateful of what goes on, like yourself and Curtis, hosting that little event that you just did, that we just finished up. 3-game event.
We're in the middle of the pandemic, right? Or
for sure,
near the end, and so we've lost the ability to play in store, play face to face. So it becomes a challenge, because like any gaming system, it can drop on a dime. You will always lose players. You won't always get new players. So we've had to try to adapt and find ways of bringing people in and keeping our current members active and engage with the community. From different little polls, what's your favorite unit to play? What was your favorite sculpt to paint and build? From canon stuff, what's your favorite, Hoth moment or anything like that? those general things to try to keep it going. And so our community is pretty active. We have a lot of great members in there. Like you said, Curtis. Curtis is my partner in the community. That the two of us are doing our best to try to keep it going. And we created a little event recently. TTS Tabletop Simulator does have a mod for this game, an excellent mod, a couple excellent mods for the game.
Yep.
And we've all kind of had to adapt to that if we want to play the game. So, Curtis and I were talking, and it's like, we don't know how long our lockdown shutdown is going to happen and if it's going to start again or whatnot. So we had to kind of change like a lot of communities did. It's adapt or die, if you will, at this point. If you don't keep your community engaged, it's going to fall apart, and maybe they're going to jump to another game that they have wanted to check out and has a more active community. So we did a TTS event. We called it an event, not a tournament, because we do have a lot of new players to the game, and we don't want to shy away from them. So we just went in with a basic general pairing, a random pairing every week, and we put a time limit on. And if you want to go past that time limit, you can. If there's a winner, there's a winner. If there's not a winner, there's not a winner. It didn't matter. Wins didn't matter. This is just to get people to the table, so to speak, virtually, and playing, keeping up with this game and keeping the interest in it. So we had matchings. We had, every week we had one. And then some of the games, a guy couldn't make the game. Some people didn't get the game in, and that was fine because there is no win or lose, remember? So there's no numbers that we're recording. We just go on to pairing on the next week. So after we did it for 3 weeks, 3 games, everybody got games, and it was all good. When we did random drawing for prizes, and it was just if you participated, you're in the draw. If you didn't, well, you're not in the draw. And we gave away a few gifts and had a store sponsor really cool prize as well, and that was just for playing. So that's pretty much the only thing we can do right now to try to keep the community going. That and show general interest, right? And
yeah, just getting involved with the communities, be it like the little painting challenge that I put up there for
that's right
as well. That definitely was well received. And the thing with painting challenges, like, it's not about who has the best painting. It's just about people, painting their stuff and showing,
keeping the interest going.
Exactly.
Something like that does. Like because painting challenge, I'm never going to win a painting challenge. So if you're having a painting challenge and it's going to be judged and the winner is going to be X on the best, it does discourage people from coming in and doing that. When you discourage people from anything, especially right now, we go back to what I talked about, that they may lose interest in the game. So doing a painting challenge like yours is saying, hey, and I'm actually going to give away a cool box of something that everybody wants to a random person that participates. That's a way to keep everybody involved. So you're going to have your high-end painters going to say, yeah, man, I want to get a hold of that box. I can't find that box set anywhere, or whatever, something that's sold out, right?
Yeah.
Or a certain model that everybody wants it sold out or something. So it's cool because it keeps all levels. And that's kind of what we did with our online TTS little event there. It kept those that are competitive and very good players and allowed those that are newer and trying to learn the game to equally have a chance to win a prize and go in with, less intimidation, if you will, is all we wanted to do, is just keep it inclusive for everybody. So
yeah, that's the way to do it. Really is. But yeah, that's some pretty good breakdown of the game and elements of the game and communities, community. So again, thanks again, Hal, for being on the show. Definitely will have you on here
welcome.
Again.
Thanks for having me. Yeah, no, it's really good. And there's so much to go into the game, right? Like you could go on forever talking about how different mechanics are done and what to do, but it's just for a general overview. Maybe one day we'll do another one on specific things about the game as well. But there's a lot more to it, but it's a very open, easy to learn game, easy to teach game as well. Lots to it. I mean, it's not Monopoly where you just roll 2 dice and move your guy that far one day or whatever it is in that game. It's not that simple, but that's not why we're playing it. We don't want exactly simple, but it's very easy to learn. And again, if you're a fan, Star Wars Legion is a great game to get into.
Yes, it is. I know I'm loving it. I know Hal's loving it. I know you guys are as well. Also, if you haven't checked out our Facebook page at Trident Wargaming, and we also do have Instagram, share your pictures. hashtag Trident Wargaming there. Share your pictures, share any comments. We love to see all that stuff. Any questions, send us messages. And also, if you're in the Edmonton area, check out the Star Wars Legion Edmonton Facebook group. I'm sure you'll see Hal will probably see the request to come in
minutes.
So great community. If you don't have guys to play with or chat with, check it out. But thanks for joining us. Hopefully we'll see you on the next episode. And remember, build it, paint it, play it. And we'll catch you next time.